What transpires when an accomplished CEO undertakes a clandestine operation and encounters discrimination within his own establishment? Saturday morning, shortly after 10 a.m. in the rearview mirror, Terence Hall adjusted the brim of his baseball cap. The man who stared back at him was scarcely recognizable, not the CEO who had established a multi-million-dollar retail empire, but merely another face in the crowd. The tailored suits that typically defined his days were in stark contrast to the plain hoodie and trousers he wore. Today was not about boardrooms or numbers. It was a matter of unexpectedly entering his own universe to observe it from the perspective of an outsider. Terence had always been a proponent of the influence of connection. The promise that every customer was significant, regardless of their origin, was the foundation of his organization. However, there have been recent rumors of complaints that have begun to circulate up the chain, including allegations of poor service, bias, and a lack of concern from his staff. He needed to know if these claims were accurate. Not in the capacity of a supervisor, but as an individual who was experiencing it. The retail establishment in issue was situated in a bustling suburban plaza just outside of Dallas, Texas. It was not the premier location or the most profitable store in his chain. However, this location was of great importance. The store was Terence's inaugural venture outside of his native state, and it proved to be a profitable endeavor. In its early years, he had visited the location on numerous occasions. However, years later, he was left with the question, had the tenderness and inclusivity that he had envisioned endured? Terence stopped his vehicle and relaxed by taking a deep inhalation. He felt a mixture of unease and anticipation. He was on the brink of venturing into the unknown, abandoning the security of his title to determine whether his business's values were still relevant. He owed the truth to himself and to each individual who entered those doors, regardless of how unsettling it was. Terence was unaware that his dedication to revealing the truth would result in a moment that would never be forgotten, one that would challenge his preconceived notions about his own business. Terence exited his vehicle and entered the crowded parking lot. The sun was already at its highest point, causing the windscreens of adjacent vehicles to reflect sharply. He adjusted the strap of his weathered canvas bag, which is the type that is typically carried over the shoulder of an everyday consumer. He was not CEO Terence Hall today. He was merely another customer whose name wasn't necessary for anyone to know. The logo was distinctive and recognizable, and the shop front shone in the sunlight. He could not help but experience a surge of pride as he approached the automatic doors. This was his creation, a vision that was transformed into actuality. The cool blast of air conditioning welcomed him inside, but pride soon gave way to focus as he crossed the threshold. The store was abuzz with activity. Children's voices rose and fell in enthusiasm near the toy aisle, as shoppers pushed carts loaded with goods. Uniformed employees moved with purpose, stocking displays, ringing up purchases, and assisting customers. In the eyes of an inexperienced observer, everything appeared to function mechanically. However, Terence was not present to superficially examine the situation. He was present to conduct a more thorough investigation. He paused in front of a display of kitchen appliances in vibrant colors, observing his surroundings. Nearby, a young woman in a striped uniform blazer engaged in conversation with a customer regarding the product specifications. The stock associate's movements were efficient and detached as he rearranged items on an adjacent shelf. At the far end of the store, a younger man was observed leaning against the electronics section counter, leisurely scrolling through his phone. Terence resolved to proceed in that direction. He deliberately moved at the tempo of a casual shopper as he wandered through the aisles. He selected a pair of headphones and examined them as if he were contemplating a purchase. It was a straightforward yet informative assessment. Would this employee confront him? Are you willing to provide support? A smile? Is there anything else? However, no response was received. The young man scarcely acknowledged his presence, let alone looked up from his phone. Terence waited, affording the employee every opportunity to participate. Nothing has changed. He experienced the onset of an uncomfortable knot in his midsection. However, he was not yet prepared to draw any conclusions. It is possible that the employee was preoccupied. It is possible that he had overlooked the situation. Terence proceeded, perusing the aisles and observing the interactions. He observed an elderly woman seeking assistance in the vicinity of the home products section. She seemed to be in a state of frustration, as she looked around for help. A second employee approached her, cheerful and attentive, before Terence could intervene to observe the events as they transpired. Her features were mellowed by relief as they commenced conversing. He had just experienced a stark contrast to this. However, Terence's subsequent actions would demonstrate that this was not a solitary oversight, as he turned back towards the electronics counter, determined to provide the young man with another opportunity. It was significantly more substantial. Terence returned to the electronics counter, this time carrying a packaged set of Bluetooth speakers. He gently deposited the box on the counter, an action that should elicit an attentive response. The young employee finally glanced up, his expression blank and uninterested. His tone conveyed that he was not particularly interested in assisting, as he inquired, "Can I assist you?" In an effort to alleviate the uncomfortable energy, Terence smiled. "Yeah, I was wondering if you could tell me a bit more about these. Are they good for outdoor use?" The employee glanced at the box briefly before shrugging. "I am uncertain. It is likely," he replied, his gaze returning to his phone. Momentarily taken aback, Terence blinks. "Could you maybe check? I want to be sure before I buy them." Terence's request appeared to be an immense inconvenience to the employee, as evidenced by his heavy sigh. He seized the carton and flipped it over, skimming the back, without uttering a word. "It indicates that they are weatherproof," he murmured, returning the item without providing any additional information. Terence experienced a surge of frustration, but he maintained his composure. "Okay. And do you know if they're compatible with most devices?" The employee's eyeballs rolled back. He gestured vaguely towards the shelf, saying, "Look, man, all the details are right here on the box. You can read it yourself. Or pick something else. Doesn't matter to me." The distant hum of the store was the only sound that broke the heavy silence that lingered between them. In his own posture, Terence could sense the tension seeping in. This was not merely inattention, it was outright dismissive. He observed that employees were treating other consumers with warmth and enthusiasm. The same young man who had previously assisted the older woman was providing personalized assistance to a Caucasian couple located near the front. Nevertheless, he was present, scarcely acknowledged. Terence resolved to continue confronting the situation with composure. He attempted to maintain a neutral demeanor, stating, "You appear to be preoccupied. Is there someone else who might be able to help?" The employee's lips curled in disgust as he sneered. "I don't think anyone's free right now. Just figure it out, all right?" Terence's anticipation of the word's impact was exceeded. He was not yet enraged. He was disheartened. This was not merely a case of poor attitude. It was something more profound. Something more repulsive. Additionally, it was not solely about him. If this was the manner in which the employee treated an individual whom he believed to be an ordinary consumer by the time you exited this establishment, how many others had experienced the same sense of indifference? The young man turned away, grabbing his phone, and walking towards the rear of the store before he could say another word. Terence maintained his position, firmly grasping the speaker box. He briefly entertained the possibility of departing, but he promptly disregarded the notion. He had not yet completed the task. However, Terence was unaware that this moment of dismissiveness would soon reveal something far more concerning about the culture he believed he had established. Terence's mind was ablaze with ideas as he repositioned the speakers on the shelf. The interaction was not only unprofessional, but it also had a personal feel. He made the decision to further investigate the store by examining the manner in which other employees interacted with customers. He needed to be certain if this singular experience was an anomaly. If it was not, he would be confronted with a more severe issue. He wandered into the apparel section, where a young Latina employee was folding shirts at a display. Her smile was sincere, and she extended a cordial greeting to him. "Let me know if you need help with anything," she indicated. It was a stark contrast to the frigid reception he had recently encountered. Terence observed her assisting an elderly individual in the vicinity while he pretended to browse. She was attentive and patient, assisting him in determining the appropriate size and even suggesting a complimentary tie. The man's gratitude was palpable, and the encounter inspired a brief moment of optimism in Terence. It is possible that the store was not wholly off course. However, as he advanced towards the home products section, a conversation halted him in his tracks. A hushed but unmistakably disrespectful exchange was taking place between two young employees who were nonchalantly leaning against a shelf. One of them subtly jerked his head in Terence's direction, stating, "That guy over there is likely just here to browse. People like him never buy anything big." Terence's jaw tightened as he feigned to inspect a collection of pots and pans. The other employee laughed. "Yeah, he doesn't look like he's got the cash for this stuff. Probably just wasting time." It struck me firmly in the core. They were unaware of his identity. To them, he was merely another black individual who was perambulating a store. They presumpted that he was unable to afford it. The casual nature of their discourse and the ease with which they dismissed him were indicative of their intentions. The situation was not limited to a single unsavory employee. It was a culture that had somehow permitted these attitudes to persist. Resisting the impulse to confront them immediately, He maintained his silence. Rather, he proceeded to the register area, intent on acquiring as much information as possible prior to addressing the matter. He observed a middle-aged black woman with a professional, empathetic demeanor ringing up consumers at the register. The name on her name badge was Denise. Terence observed her as she greeted each individual with a smile, her voice remaining steady and inviting. She lifted her head and smiled when his turn arrived. "Did you find everything okay?" Terence responded with a measured tone, "Not exactly. However, I believe I will delay for the time being." Denise's smile was slightly hesitant, but she continued to assent. "Well, if you need anything, just let us know. We're here to help." Terence felt a momentary relief from the weight on his chest as a result of her genuine sincerity. It was evident that not all individuals in this establishment harbored the same dismissive stance. However, it also identified the inconsistency. What accounted for the disparity between the hospitable demeanor of certain employees and the overt bias of others? Terence was unable to escape the sensation that something more significant was at play as he exited the store. He was aware that it was time to confront the truth directly. The afternoon heat pressed against the windows as Terence sat in his car. He maintained a firm grasp on the steering wheel while gazing out at the store that displayed the logo of his organization. It appeared to be a dream. His pride and delight, this business was intended to symbolize respect, fairness, and opportunity. However, the experiences he had recently encountered presented him with an entirely different perspective, one that he was ill-equipped to confront but could not disregard. The casual comments he overheard in the home goods section that cut the deepest, as opposed to the dismissive behavior from the electronics employee, persisted in his mind. These were not isolated incidents. They suggested that there was a more profound issue within his organization's ethos that had been left unaddressed. He reflected on the early stages of the business, during which he personally trained each manager and recruited staff based on shared values. He had previously underscored the significance of treating each consumer as if they were family, irrespective of their status or expenditure. However, as the organization expanded, it became increasingly challenging to preserve these personalized details. Delegation was indispensable, however, had it been instituted at the expense of the principles he had labored to establish? Terence was compelled to contemplate whether he had become excessively detached from the day-to-day operations. The expansion that success had brought had also resulted in the formation of blind areas. Were managers cultivating an environment of respect, or were they ignoring subtle prejudices and unprofessionalism? Had he neglected to provide his employees with the necessary resources to address bias and ensure that all individuals are treated fairly? He exhaled deeply, his mind reliving the previous interactions. Denise, the benevolent attendant, had served as a reminder of the values that his business should uphold. However, her colleagues were being eclipsed by those who did not subscribe to her principles. It was not solely about the user experience, it was also about the culture that he had permitted to establish. Terence retrieved his notebook, which was consistently stored in the glove compartment, and recorded his musings. This was not merely a matter of repairing a single store, it was also a matter of guaranteeing that each employee in every location understood their obligation to represent the brand. It was a matter of accountability from the highest echelons. However, Terence was aware that there was one additional step he needed to take before he could begin to rebuild. A step that would expose the extent of the issue and challenge those who were at its core. Terence returned to the store with a calm resolve. He was not present to incite a public outcry or humiliate anyone. This was not a matter of vanity. It was about confronting a culture that had deviated from its intended course. He proceeded to the customer service desk and requested to speak with the store manager. A male in his late 40s approached after a few moments. His demeanor was professional but slightly cautious, and his name tag read Brian. "What can I do to assist you today?" he inquired. Terence extended his hand. "Terence Hall," he said, as Brian's pupils widened in recognition. "I'm the owner of this store." The manager's composure briefly wavered before he was able to regain it. "Mr. Hall, it's an honor to meet you. If I'd known you were visiting," Terence extended his hand to prevent him from continuing. "That's the point, Brian. You weren't supposed to know. I came here as a regular customer to see how things are really running. And what I saw today, it wasn't good." Brian's complexion developed a faint flush. "I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me what happened?" Terence described the day's events, including the electronics employees' indifference, the overheard comments, and the glaring disparities in customer treatment. His words were laden with disappointment, despite his ability to speak calmly and firmly. "This isn't just about one bad employee," he indicated. "It's about a culture that allows this kind of behavior to exist. I've built this company on the idea that every customer deserves respect, regardless of who they are. Today, I saw the opposite of that. Uncomfortably, Brian shifted. I wasn't aware of these issues. I've always tried to ensure our team follows the company's values. Terence acknowledged. I believe you. But clearly, something is slipping through the cracks. And it's not just your responsibility, it's mine too. Somewhere along the way, I've let the values I built this company on get diluted. That ends today. He requested that Brian convene the staff for an unexpected meeting in the break room. The employees were convened in a matter of minutes, their expressions a combination of apprehension and curiosity. Terence was no longer merely another customer, he was the unexpected leader who stood before them. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice remaining steady. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Terence Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of this company. And today, I came here undercover to see how things are running on the ground." The room fell silent as the weight of his words began to settle in. Terence paused to examine each individual's visage prior to proceeding. "What I saw today was troubling. Some of you showed kindness and professionalism, the kind of attitude this company was built on. But others failed to meet even the most basic standard of respect. And that failure isn't just on you, it's on me, for not ensuring our culture stays consistent." He turned his attention to the young electronics employee, who was now appearing wan and anxious. "You dismissed me, ignored me, and made it clear I wasn't worth your time. That's unacceptable. But even worse, I overheard two employees speaking about me, making assumptions about who I am and what I could afford, based on nothing more than a glance." Terence maintained his composure amid the perceptible tension in the room. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to fix this. Because if we don't treat every customer with respect, we fail. And I won't let this company fail." Terence was aware that this was merely the beginning of the adjustments he needed to make as he observed their expressions transition from shock to reflection. Terence took a moment to allow the room to quiet down. The significance of his words had been realized, and the subsequent phase, action, was of paramount importance. He was aware that merely identifying the issues was insufficient. It was imperative that he served as the catalyst for a resolution. He continued, his voice composed yet unwavering, "This is what will transpire. This isn't about punishment or pointing fingers, it's about accountability and growth. Every single one of us, myself included, has a responsibility to uphold the values this company was built on. Starting today, we're making changes." He addressed Brian, the store manager. "First, we're going to implement mandatory training on bias and customer service, not just here, but across every store. It's not enough to assume people know how to treat others. We need to teach it, reinforce it, and hold people accountable." Brian's expression was a combination of determination and relief, as he nodded. Terence addressed the group once more, stating, "I will ensure that it occurs. Second, I'll be visiting more stores in person, unannounced. This isn't about catching anyone off guard, it's about staying connected. I need to see firsthand what's happening on the ground." The employees exchanged apprehensive glances, but the atmosphere was one of mutual understanding. Terence observed that several of them, particularly Denise, were subtly nodding in accord. "Lastly," Terence said, his tone softening, "I want to hear from all of you, what's working, what's not. If there are issues with leadership or policies, I need to know. My door is open, but more importantly, I'll make sure you have a way to voice concerns anonymously if you're not comfortable coming to me directly." Terence interpreted the employee's apparent relaxation as an indication to conclude on a sincere note. "I started this company because I wanted to create something different, something better, a place where everyone, no matter who they are, felt valued. Somewhere along the way, we lost a little of that. But I'm not giving up on it. I know we can do better, and I'm counting on all of you to help make that happen." Terence approached Denise, the cashier who had demonstrated professionalism and compassion, as the meeting concluded. "I am grateful for your kindness today," he expressed with a sincere smile. "Your attitude reminds me why I started this business." Denise reciprocated the smile, maintaining a constant tone in her voice. "Thank you, Mr. Hall. I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated." Terence experienced a combination of hope and exhaustion as he exited the store for the second time that day. Although the path ahead would be challenging, it was essential. He had received a wake-up call, and it was now his responsibility to take action. Terence's sense of purpose was rekindled as he drove away. He was aware that the only way to progress was to confront difficult truths on occasion, and that every step towards change began with an individual who was willing to take the first step. If this narrative resonated with you, it is important to remember that even the most insignificant actions can have the most significant consequences. Demonstrate respect for others, speak out against injustice, and continue to strive for a more equitable and improved world. And don't neglect to subscribe for additional stories that motivate change.